Good afternoon, everyone. This is Griffin Greer with Motility's Professional Services Department. This afternoon's webinar, or the first of the two afternoon webinars today, we will be discussing deal desking, how to start a deal, general navigation of the module, and hopefully answer any questions you may have about the deal desking / F&I portion of Motility. We'll go ahead and give a few more minutes here for everyone to get dialed in and comfortable. So feel free to top off your coffee, take a restroom break. We'll go ahead and get started here in about 5 after, so about 3 or 4 minutes, we'll go ahead and begin. All right, everyone, thank you all for holding. We wanted to give a few more minutes for anybody joining in a few minutes late. So again, this is Griffin here with Motility Software's Professional Services team. Today's afternoon 1 o'clock webinar will be covering deal desking. So without any other interruptions, we'll go ahead and get started. Feel free as we go through our session to reach out via the Q&A panel through Zoom. If the question's relevant to where we're at, I'll definitely try to stop and answer as we go. Otherwise, we'll try to have a quick Q&A session here at the end to make sure everyone's questions do get answered. So if anything else, just take notes, and let me know how things are going. So we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who are on our CRM session this morning, welcome. This will kind of, be a perfect transition from the last screen we saw into deal desking. Now, before we actually show the deal desking module, I would like to show you a base functionality here that I'd like you to be aware of. And that is your team's ability to have sales, the sales salespersons, sales professionals, whatever you want to call them, will actually be able to generate quotes directly from our CRM module. Not that you have to do it from here, but it kind of falls in perfectly with how the sales team members are operating with the system. So for example, this morning we did a new contact, a Griffin Greer entity here that we wanted to possibly start a deal for. I could find that by coming in first thing this morning, searching up all of my leads, plug my name in here, say, okay, what have I got going on today? Maybe I forgot to plug in information relevant to, when I should prospect, but I know Griffin's name popped up. Or, hey, he showed up early. So we can actually generate that quote directly from the lead info tab right here called Start New Quote. This is permission restricted, so if users should not have the availability to do this, we can prevent it. But to me, this is the best place for your team members if you do allow your sales professionals or salespersons to start a quote, to do it from here. The reason I say that is there's less likely that you grab the wrong entity information. You've got all the vehicle info, the co-buyer, everything's here. So if you start it from directly off of the entity record, you know that you're not grabbing any of the wrong info. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start our new quote. We'll talk about these presets here shortly, but this is just information that can pre-fill every time your team members create a quote. So I'll go ahead and hit Start New Quote. Still have not turned this into my desking manager yet, but this is just to get the quote generated. From here, we'll go ahead and pick one of the customer's preferences. So, hey, Mr. Greer was interested in one of these Hyundais. And then the default finance manager at this location is also myself. So maybe I'm a salesperson and a sales professional. So now I've generated my quote. Here's my unit. If there was any, it looks like the preference we had was already locked down on a different deal. So we'll have to research a different Hyundai for this Mr. Greer here. But as you can see, my quote would now, once we've got a vehicle record in here, would be ready to print out. So as you can see, launching this from directly within the CRM is totally possible. So you don't have to train your sales team members, how to navigate that deal desking module if really all they're doing is launching that quote, which they can do from right here. So we'll go ahead and stop this process here because I do want to show you it in full from the other module. But just know that this is probably the perfect place if you are comfortable with those sales team members starting quotes, they can do so from here. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into deal desking/F&I. So this module will hold every quote, every contract, every done deal, even your canceled deals forever. So as long as you have access to this program, you will be able to research historically completed deals, even if the done dates on those, I can filter some of these dates back to 2012. So I can record or recapture any information that happened in that 2012 deal, I can always recall and review. You also have canceled deals. Also, in case a customer comes back and was curious about what they were interested in a year ago, you can always use this historical information to hopefully bring up some relevant items from the last time they tried to purchase. So you may be asking yourselves, well, how do you populate each of these screens? Because as you create quotes, they populate in this tab, the quote tab. Then we turn it into a deal and we begin working through our sales pipeline. That'd be F&I, getting credit submitted, getting a buyer's order signed. And then once the customer does take delivery, we mark that unit as done. Or if the complete deal spins out and we need to cancel it, we would place it here. But everything will always be in one of these four tables once it's created. We don't delete many things in Motility, which is both a good and bad thing, right? Don't delete anything. Well, now you have to keep those records clean, but that's good because you always have historical accuracy to exactly what happened, and you can always kind of research from that point of view. So just always know that you'll always be able to find one of these items after they've been created. So let's talk about a little bit of navigating this module. Before we go ahead and run through a kind of a pseudo quote, but just to show you some of the flexibility. So first off, you have all of this information here is customizable by you, right? My screen might be slightly different from my finance managers, and maybe my sales team members, I don't even want them to have this same view. Well, every login, every individual has their ability to customize this screen. So when you hit customize down here, I can remove things. For example, maybe entity number isn't relevant for me. Maybe I use the customer's name to research them. So entity number for me is fairly pointless. So we'll go ahead and remove it. So you can see you can get your list view here very simple. Maybe I don't care when the deal was closed, just when it was sent to accounting and marked done. So you could take that out. So there's a couple items here that you could remove and get this list streamlined. So now you're all looking at the same pieces of information. But again, this is something that even though this is per user, I would sit down as a F&I or a deal desking team and discuss, how should my sales managers and finance managers be reviewing this list? If the date of deposit is relevant for my team to capture, if only one of our F&I managers has deposit on here and nobody else does, well, it's not going to be easy for him to say, hey, find the deposit cashed out today, because none of the other team members will have that same field. So it is good to discuss, you may not organize yours the same way. So maybe deposits you put over here, the deposit amounts you also put over here. Again, the layout can be completely different person to person, but I would try to standardize the fields that all of you are seeing so that everyone's seeing the same thing. Okay, just a little bit of kind of housekeeping to make sure you don't tell your sales manager, hey, where's that $500 deposit? If he can't readily see the deposit amounts right here, it's much harder for him to find that. So just keep that in mind. The statuses themselves is also something that you'll want to review. Many dealerships I work with, they just take the stock listing of statuses that the system comes with, and they just use that, which you can get away with, right? There's enough statuses in here from the defaults for the system to work appropriately, but this may not be the proper pipeline that you all kind of see or visualize within your dealership. So let's walk through this as an example. Well, every quote gets started as a negotiating no deposit. And what does that do? Well, we can tell the quote to change the unit status, in which case this is just going to make sure that it says ready for sale. Or I can keep the status of the unit whatever it was, in which case leave this blank, and the unit status will not change. And maybe we don't want that. Just because someone started a quote for this unit doesn't necessarily mean we want to change its status. So maybe we'll just leave that alone. I can also assign statuses to the vehicle trade and the entity, but maybe those things aren't relevant until later on in the sales process, at least for trade. But as you can see for entity, well, we'll probably want to mark them as a negotiating deposit customer once they do actually take that deposit on the deal. So let's walk this back a minute. Remember, we talked about your statuses in the CRM. Well, there's no need for your sales team members to change the status of a lead once prospecting has stopped and working a deal has begun, if we just let the deal change the statuses for us. So the most appropriate way to let the entity statuses change is let the deal dictate what that entity says. So as I move this deal downward, the list, you'll see customer moves from negotiating deposit into running credit for reports for ready for finance. And then once paperwork is marked signed, the customer status starts to show as sold. So let the system make these status changes for you, and your sales pipeline will follow suit. So when you're sending follow-up marketing to all of your sold contacts, because they were on a deal marked as posted to accounting, the customer record will show as sold, and therefore any marketing materials you send out to sold customers will include the customer that was on this deal. So again, a lot of setup items can be handled here. So start asking questions internally. What does your sales process look like? Once you can come to us, you can either change these statuses yourselves by simply overriding them or adding new statuses to the list. Having too many statuses is never a good thing, nor is having too few. So obviously you want to try to keep this list fairly clean, but obviously enough that it represents the sales process from start to finish. Keep in mind unit status changing, right? Maybe you have your website and you want a unit to get pulled from your website once it hits a status of sale pending. So then you know that as soon as a deal gets marked into the negotiating deposit status, it's going to mark the unit as sale pending and therefore take it off of your website. So just by moving a deal from quote, downward through the sales pipeline can automate how your unit records are showing and how your customer records are showing. So let the deal dictate all of that. You'll find less scrambling on the other two portions of the software because they all follow suit correctly. Okay. Again, every dealership operates a little differently, so not any one status list is going to work for everyone. Just know you have complete control over here. And if you have questions, let us know and we can try to advise, what might make sense. Do we add a new status? Do we take away? Or maybe we have one certain status, do something slightly differently to the other records in the system when we do select it. We do also have a full delivery calendar that can be populated automatically by the deal simply being marked into a certain status. So that's something we can talk about, probably in an advanced session for those of you that do want to track your deliveries on a calendar, but just know that that's also an option. So you've seen a little bit about how we can customize, the deal flow. Now I'd like to show you what a new quote looks like and walk through the deal itself, answer some questions onto how to, code a deal correctly for products, and then, a quick posting of the deal. We'll do a full deal post involving the accounting transactions and maybe some more of the management staff later, but probably plan on this training or this webinar to be really just navigating within the deal itself. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Let's create a quote. So as you saw earlier, I could create a quote directly from within the CRM entity that we have selected. But you can also do so from directly in the deal desking module by populating this search right here. So I'm going to use my same Greer entity. I've got my customer in front of me. I don't know which Griffin Greer it is, so maybe I'll ask him his address and he will be able to help me isolate that. So great. There's my customer information. If I click clear, it'll wipe this out and allow me to search up a new entity. But at this point, I could either start a quote or start a deal. Now, most dealerships want you to start it as a quote and then move it over to a deal because a deal does a couple different things differently than a quote does. And really those main things are when you start a deal for a unit, it will mark the unit on hold and lock that unit from any other deals utilizing it, which could be good or bad. Now, if this is a solid deal, a customer's got a down payment on it, we do want to lock it down. But if a customer just coming in to look at a unit, there'd be no sense of me creating a deal because now it's going to mark that unit on hold. And if they really aren't interested in that, now we've kind of removed that item or that unit from our available pool of sales, maybe slowing down someone else who's got cash down ready to go today versus someone who's just looking for a few weeks. So I would always start a quote first. Now, we talked about these presets. So what can a preset do for you? Well, I've gone into dealerships and seen 10, 15, 20 presets in here. So what are the things that you could preset? So I'm going to click edit here just so you can see. Now, some of these items, for example, like your fees, right? Every deal needs to have a doc fee of $135 marked as sold, a prep fee for $15, and a use tax fee. So automatically, when I start a deal, or a quote, I should say, all these items pre-fill. So every quote starts with $260 of fees ready to go. We can also preload things like accessories. Maybe every delivery we have includes a prep for delivery, right? So maybe within the preset, I pre-fill a prep for delivery where we charge the customer $0, and we pre-fill that maybe we have $250 of labor and parts that we're going to add to this unit as part of prep work. Maybe fill in the propane, making sure the battery's ready to go. And then that way, when we're ready to drop this PDI work, no one needs to remember, did we add it to the quote or not? It was already in there. Same thing for taxes. Maybe you're already your home state is Florida and your county is Seminole County. Now every deal you start has a 7.5% amount of tax already calculated because these have been pre-filled. Maybe you create a deal preset called exempt taxes, and then that preset includes the exemptions all the way across. So those things that you don't want your sales team members to have to think about, or specifics. Maybe certain brands you sell have to have a special fee applied. So you could set that brand up here. So every Heartland product you sell automatically has a upcharge for because you have a factory rebate receivable coming in, and we can preload that into those presets. So you don't have to use presets if you don't want to, but you'll find that keying in quote after quote after quote will pretty quickly get exhausting without having, filled up all these presets. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and start this quote. We'll preset what I can here. If any of this vehicle information or vehicles are still available, it will let us add it. So let's go ahead and hit apply. That unit has already been sold. So what do I want to do here? Well, I'm just going to not include a unit. And we'll go ahead. So the preference that Mr. Greer had asked about is sold. We're going to have to let him know, unfortunately, that unit's gone. But maybe we can help him find something else. So let's go ahead and do that. So right now, all my quote has, I'm going to go ahead and maximize this so it's a little easier to see. Correct, right? We always want every quote by custom. Go to the units tab. We'll go to stock number. And maybe he's expressed interest in another make or model. So let's type in, see if we've got any Wildwoods in here. So I can type in Wildwood, find that unit, but that one's also sold, right? So sometimes you can find information in here to old sold inventory, which could be good or bad. And you can always disinclude that information by checking the sold box to see, here's all this sold records to maybe compare to so we can purchase something new, and order it custom for this customer. Or just simply uncheck the sold, and now you're going to see all the vehicle records not marked sold. So I'm going to pick something at random here. I will just pick up one of these Keystone units. I'll pick this Keystone Montana. I brought in my serial number, my year, make, model, any pricing information relevant to that unit, and then we'd be golden. All right, maybe if that unit was not what we were interested in and we wanted to find something else, you can always swap out units pretty freely just by picking that next available record. So I'm going to try this Chevrolet Corvette. This is just prompting me for a few items. Do we want to populate our unit? Well, our unit pricing doesn't seem to be very good. Whoever was in charge of stocking this in may not have put the right price on it. So I'm just going to upgrade this with a better price. But as you can see, all this information does populate automatically, and this is coming from vehicle inventory. If you do find that the serial number is wrong or anything is wrong, you can always jump to a unit record right here by hitting Modify Inventory. And this will allow you to make changes to these items in case it was stocked in incorrectly. Now, I will say this, for all of you using Motility here, I would place heavy emphasis on the inventory personnel stocking in units. And the reason I say that is whenever I visit a dealership and there are numbers of issues within the deal and they have to go back and forth and fix it, generally those problems all arise because the unit was stocked in incorrectly. Maybe the price was wrong, we didn't build in freight when we bought the unit, the floor plan was wrong, whatever the case may be, many times the problem starts at the unit. So if your inventory team stocks in every unit as well as they can, with as perfect information off of the MSO as possible, you will find less errors within the deal process that has to, cause the finance or sales manager to stop and, fix that record before printing contracts. So again, usually deals run very smoothly if the units themselves were keyed in correctly, in a timely fashion. So I would just keep that in mind. So any vehicle changes, again, we could make here. As soon as we jump out, it will update that vehicle record. So with that in mind, oops, kicked out my price again. So I've got a customer and I have a vehicle record. At this point, I would probably want to start working my quote numbers or my buyer's order numbers. Now, I'm going to kind of wear both hats here, right? I'm a sales manager as well as a salesperson. So again, this process may be slightly different. Sometimes at this point, it would be ready for you to print the quote and then turn that into a sales manager. If that were the case, we could print that quote by clicking on the Print Docs button, either on this quote tab or on this buyer's order tab. So you may be asking, what is the difference between these two? Well, note that if I make a change to the price here and say I upcharge this to $12,000, it changes on the buyer's order too. So these two tabs are sharing information in the fields that you see on both, but the buyer's order does not show unit cost. It does not show pack. It does not show options costs. All it shows is the front end information for a salesperson to utilize. Versus the quote tab, if you notice, does include pack, options costs, our gross profit, our margin, These may not be things you want the sales team members to see. So usually a salesperson is restricted to use the buyer's order tab, and a sales manager or an F&I manager is going to use the quote tab. So that's something, permissions wise, when your team accesses this module, they will either be restricted or see, based on what their permissions access grants them. So if I were a salesperson and I saw the buyer's order, well, with my customer, my vehicle, and some basic information in here, I could go ahead and print one of these 3 documents. So note that when you set up your print shortcuts, the top 3 and you have full customization here, you have about 20 buttons that you can customize fully, so that when you click one of these, your forms will print out. Now, you could create a button that says Deal Jacket, and it could print out 7 or 8 different laser forms. You don't have to click each time for one of those forms. You click the button one time, and it can load up and submit all of those forms to your print queue. So really handy when you have, a title app, a delivery worksheet, any sort of, government documents or state forms that need to be applied. So keep in mind, you can load up a lot of that really quickly. But from a salesperson's point of view, if I've got the quote sheet available to me right here, I could just click quote generic. That'll go ahead and print that out. I can give that both to my customer as well as my sales manager. And then once we decide to maybe take a deposit and move forward, we can lock in that quote into a deal. So again, having your forms available via these shortcuts can make it very simple for your sales team members to get these documents into your customers' hands. But we could also limit them so they cannot print at all, and it would still be the responsibility of the desking or sales manager to print out any of these forms. So however you would like to run it, just know that you've got a couple different options there. Now, let's say I did go ahead and print this quote out, and the customer was pretty happy with what they saw, and they wanted to go ahead and put a deposit down. So a deposit is really locking this sale in, right? We're saying that, this customer is putting money down. We're going to go ahead and put the unit on hold for them. And barring anything crazy, this deal should move forward to the delivery process. So to take a deposit, we have to turn this quote into a deal. And you may think that that's a big process change. In reality, to make a quote into a deal, you just click this deal number box, and that's it. It'll put your unit on hold. It could change the status of that unit, so it now pulls it off of the website so that it's no longer displayed as available. And now we can take our deposit, because again, all I've done is click the deal number box, so I have a quote number as well as a deal number. Now I can proceed. You cannot take money down on just a quote. It will force you to turn it into a deal. So it's always good to make sure that that process happens. And if you try to without turning it into a deal, it will warn you and force you to click on that box. So now that we've turned this into a deal, let's take our deposit. So I clicked on the deposits tab. You could either fill in the deposit here, or you can add the new deposit in this record, but keying it in here isn't going to do anything because we still need to click the cash out button. So if I mistyped it on the field, but I said it's actually $5,500 we need down on this, it'll tell you, okay, it's right there, but it's in yellow. Yellow meaning that it has not been cashed out. So very frequently, if you ever see color coding within this system, the system's always trying to point you in the right direction. So yellow on the service tab likely means there's open service work for this unit, and we need to be aware of it. Red on the units tab probably means my VIN is not passing the decoder check, and that makes sense because that doesn't look like a 17-character VIN, so someone probably typed that in wrong. So again, look for those colors. They're going to identify something wrong. Why is my cost in yellow? Because it's an estimate. There's open service work out there, so that cost could totally change once that service work does get applied. I want to get this deal done as quickly as possible based on my margin. We're making a lot of money on this one, so let's get that deposit down. Why don't we go ahead and cash it out? So to actually fully submit this deposit, we would need to click on the cash out box. It will require me to make a invoice save, and now I can go ahead and take my deposit. So maybe the customer is paying with $1,000 cash. We'll go ahead and plug that in. Maybe they're giving us a check number 6789. They're going to go ahead and give us a $3,000 check. I could put a check memo in here if need be. And then the remaining $1,500, they're going to go ahead and put on their Visa card. This would prompt my payment terminal to go ahead and swipe for $1,500. And now I've collected the deposit in full. I have to click one of these receipt items to complete. If I hit back or cancel, this process will cancel and we'll have to start it over again. In this case, I'm going to click email receipt. I don't have a printer hooked up, but it will grab that customer's email address if it's on their customer record, and it will go ahead and submit a PDF copy of that receipt to them. That message will pop up. I can populate this with any additional info like, hey, thank you for your purchase, and then go ahead and send it. I'm not going to send the email for the sake of this being a demo, but you get the gist of it. So now I've locked in this deposit. It cashed out. I've got a cash out date. So now my accounting team would expect to see $5,500 in their clearing accounts. But now I want to identify on the deal that we've taken a deposit. So I'm going to mark this as negotiating deposit. So it changed my deal into blue. And remember, what did this deal just do? So let's go ahead and jump out of it. We're back in our main deal listing here. I'm not going to find the document we've been working on in this quote screen anymore, because now that I marked it as a negotiating deposit, it is now in this open deal listing. And if I sort by delivery date, and you can default this so every time you log in, it's sorted by delivery date, you can see at the very top, well, there's the deposit we just put down, the $5,500. We took a deposit today, and there's that date. Here's the manager, the salesperson, the bank that's financing this. All of that's ready to go for me to jump back in. Remember too, though, what else have we done? Well, because I picked the deal status, let's look at what the status table is telling me. It would have changed the unit to sale pending, and it changed our entity status to negotiating note or deposit. So now whether I have mail campaigns utilizing this information, or simply now my sales team member know to look for any of their open negotiating deposit customers, now we know to quickly stay on top of these to make sure this deal does get delivered in the month specified. Okay, so let's jump back into that deal. Okay, and let's go. And there's just warning me that this unit is on hold for another deal. Someone probably didn't void their previous deal, but the unit is available. We went ahead and touched it. Customer is really interested in it. They put a deposit down. Now let's actually work the numbers and talk about what else we can do within the deal. We probably won't touch every single field here, but I will discuss how they are utilized and where you might. And of course, we can expand upon this with some more deep dive deal desking training one-on-one. But I've got my customer and my vehicle record. Let's talk about what else is up here at the top. This recall selector just allows you to move between deals really quickly. However, I would advise to you that if you have the deal number or the quote numbers not just memorized but written down, you can always jump right to that deal by typing in the deal number here or the quote number here. You'll find that probably the fastest way to navigate this module is to have the deal number ready, because then you can just jump right to it from here. Alternatively, like I know this deal number is 111310. So if I get out of this, there's a shortcut down here in screen number down in the bottom left. And if you type D for deal number and type in 111310 and hit enter, it'll jump to that deal no matter where it is. Canceled, open, done, you name it. So again, deal number is probably the quickest way you can find these pieces of information. Maybe I don't have the deal number available, but I do know the stock number and the customer name. So I know the customer's last name was Greer. I know the stock number was 10003. I'm missing a zero. There we go. So you can see I can also, isolate this piece of data just by grabbing that there. So always a number of ways to find what you're looking for. I would just try to standardize it. So if the dealership always knows to look for customer name and stock number, make sure all the other sales and finance managers are aware of that, so that you can all give each other the same type of information and it works out for everyone. We talked about the quote and the deal numbers. Let's talk about the deal type. So whether you do financing, wholesale deals, deal leasing, quote, how it starts, or it's a cash deal, these will change some parameters within the deal. So for example, if I set this to lease, there is a lease tab that will populate and it grays out the buyer's order and the quote, right? We're not doing a sale, we're doing a lease. So now this tab becomes available if you do leasing. If this is a cash deal and I set this to cash, well, the quote tab is going to work, But instead of using any financing terms or expecting that this top right finance source is our lender, well, it's just going to give us, hey, this is the outstanding cash owed from this customer. So these can change options. As you notice, when I change it back to finance, look at this section. Now I have payments per year. So I have a 10-year term, 4.99% interest, 30 days out from today's date. So I have a $63 a month payment over the next 10 years if I were to go ahead and finance this as is. So depending upon the deal type selected will change the functionality of the deal, as well as if I go pull a report, I can pull a report on all my finance deals versus all my wholesale versus all my cash. So just make sure you code the deal correctly. Otherwise, you might find that the functionality you need to continue this contracting won't be available to you. Again, if this is a finance deal, you'll need to pick the finance source up here in the top right. This is a pre-populated table, so everyone picks the correct item. And that table can be populated from edit, modify, finance source. Now, let's say these lenders have specific terms, like their default reserve, or maybe the days to first payment, or maybe they are always a specific payments per year. However the case may be, you can pre-fill that information in this table so that when you pick that finance source, it will be available to everybody. Okay. You have 3 dates up here to utilize as to when this deal is going to be delivered, purchased, and signed. Sometimes these 3 dates are the exact same. Otherwise, maybe the customer's signing the contract and purchasing to use it as of the 11th, but they're not taking delivery until this Saturday when they can bring their truck to come hitch it up. So one of these dates will be utilized by the accounting team to send this to accounting, and this is specified in your implementation. So usually one of the implementation team members will ask you, how would you like to post your deals to accounting? And typically what I see is delivery date, because once the customer has the unit, there's less likelihood that it's going to bounce back or potentially need to be unposted. So once it's delivered, it's pretty safe to post it to accounting. So most dealerships will default to delivery date. So when the post to accounting button gets hit, that's the day the deal posts back to. Now, this delivery date also has secondary function. Remember, I talked about there's a delivery calendar. If you're interested in using that delivery calendar, you just need to simply fill out a date and time here. Automatically, the system will add this deal to the calendar because we have it in a status that's checked off as delivery calendar. If that status is not checked off as delivery calendar, it won't put it on the calendar. And so the idea is that as a deal moves from deposit through to getting delivered, it will continue to stay on this calendar so our team can prep the unit, make sure that everything's ready to go so that once finance is done, they can go ahead and get that unit to the customer as quickly as possible so they can take delivery. So we've talked about some of the header information up here at the top. Let's continue forward and just work our way through the quote. A lot of questions here probably, but also a lot of data. I would just try to hold your questions so we can get through and then maybe answer some of the specifics later. But just know there's a lot of information here. So I'm going to try to get through as much of this as I can so that we can see everything before our hour is up. So on this quote sheet, we have things like the selling price, right? That's coming from unit inventory. We've got total other options. This is the sum of any additional options that the customers agreed to. So we can set up accessory codes that will show as available to sell. So if a customer wants to upsell on a brake controller, a depth finder, apologize, some of these are boat examples, and a PDI, here we go. So right now, I have added about $970 of other options. Excellent. So now my customer's deal goes up by that much, and we can actually generate a work order from this screen by hitting Start Service RO. Well, the customer's agreed to these items. They've signed the buyer's order. We've taken their deposit. I could go ahead and Start Service RO, and this is going to create a service ticket under the prep and delivery status with this invoice number. Now, because it's coming over with a certain status, I don't even have to tell my prep manager that I have a deal dropping, because automatically they're going to see it's a prep ticket with these 3 accessories, and the date time promised on that service ticket is going to match the delivery date up here. So they know they have until Friday at 8 a.m. to get these items installed and ready to go so this customer can take delivery. So Once you've added those accessories, they drop out of this top section and they go down here to the bottom, but then you can see it still keeps our price in here. Pretty straightforward. You can do a discount, so just a flat $500 discount to give you a total retail amount. If there was a trade on this deal, the trade allowance in ACV could be populated here. Otherwise, you could go to the Trades tab, click Add Trade, pick from this entity's drop-down of trades. It looks like Mr. Greer has not specified any trades that, that he's interested in trading in, but we could manually key in his Ford F-150, put in his relevant information. If there's still a lien against this unit, we can pick the lien holder, populate this with the outstanding payoff amount. Otherwise, I could just come down here to the allowance and say, we're going to go ahead and give Griffin, let me pick one here. We're going to go ahead and give Griffin $8,000 allowance on this Ford F-150, and it's valued at $5,500 actual cash value. And you'll see that that populates both over here. Our vehicle cost has gone up. How much has it gone up? The value of the cost of the accessories that we added to that service invoice. We can still see in real time where that service ticket is at because it's in yellow. I know it's not done, but the price of that RO is still included here. So I still have an average gross margin based on, where we're at with the current ticket. Gross profit, any rebates or factory discounts can be added here. And, let us know as you're getting the system set up, we can have these populate so that the receivables coming from that factory can be put to an AR account of your choosing, so that each time you sell a certain brand, you can collect that $250 spiff or whatever the case may be. You can also tie those two fields into this rebate and spiffs tab so that you can assign who's getting what spiff and where so that it's collectible when that check is assigned. You've got more cost information here on the quote. Again, if I go to the buyer's order, you do not see any of that. So keep in mind your sales team members will not be seeing cost unless you allow them to, and you would allow them by giving them access to this quote tab. We have some breakdowns here: retail minus the net of the trade, retail minus the trade allowance, allowance less the ACV. For those of you that do any balloon term, calculations, you can punch in the term length of the, the balloon interest rate. We also have a roll payment calculator here. So if, my customer is at look at this, with all the money they put down, their payments are negative, which would probably throw a warning. Let's expand that out a bit. It's because their interest rate got removed. We'll put that there, and let's go ahead and upcharge this so I have some real figures here. All right, so this guy's got a $42 a month payment. Let's say even that is a bit of a miss, and he needs to be at $35 a month or less to make this deal happen. You could come down here to payment required, type in $35, and the system's going to give you what we need to do to make that happen. So if I roll the selling price down, you'll see that it gets pretty close. It doesn't round exactly to it, but it'll get you within, a couple pennies of that payment amount. So you can do the same thing for gross profit. If I'm looking for a 80% or a 80% gross margin here, I would also need to do a number of things to get this to the right place. So just keep in mind that's some functionality that'll help you target what you need. Cash on delivery amount, if we're going to take another amount on deposit when they take delivery, we can put that here. Any customer rebate, this is just kind of a returnable rebate back to our customer through accounts payable. And then the lien coming from the trade like we talked about will populate here. Okay, the last big ticket item here on this quote and buyer's order tab is going to be our additional accessories. Our additional products. So if you sell extended warranty, gap, road guard, tire and wheel, you name it, your forms team will let us know. We will get that added to this table here. You'll pick the vendor or the supplier of that product here. So every time you sell this product, the payable goes to Protective, or in this case, CoachNet. So why don't I mark this as extended warranty sold? I can put the amount of months term length, that's 60 months, 10,000 miles or 100,000 miles. There's their deductible that'll automatically populate when they come in for that work, and then the contract and plan name. As you mark these items sold, you'll see the total back end starts to populate. So keep in mind that We can pre-fill these amounts where in your deal presets, so they automatically populate, but you can always override this here with the true amount. It's not as complicated as it seems. Just make sure we have all the products both in here and available to use, and really your sales team is just marking them sold, yes or no. Your sales taxes are calculating from the taxes tab. We'll be there in just a moment. And then the total amount financed, this is the outstanding finance amount. So if we were to go ahead and post this deal to accounting, this is going to be our contracts in transit amount coming from Bank of the West, excuse me. We've talked about most of these tabs. Other fees we've talked about, these should preload. You can always override to a different amount if you need to, but usually you'll just kind of leave these as they are. If they're preset correctly, they'll be applied on every deal. Equity savings program was a functionality that a dealership had requested from us years ago. I don't usually turn this on unless it's by need, so we can skip that there. Memo is just a memo field for you to populate information on. Note that the buyer's order memo could potentially populate on the buyer's order, so you want to make sure you're careful here with what you plug in. We talked about the deposits tab, pretty straightforward. The only thing I did not mention is, let's say this customer cancels and we need to refund their deposit. Typically, the best way to do that is take the deposit again just as a negative. If I were to go ahead and cash this out and return this amount to our customer, I could, or I could cash this out and put it on their account so that then our accounts receivable team or our payable team could go create a check or a customer refund off of that on-account balance that you've placed here. So depending upon whether you refund them directly at the counter or you submit this to have a check returned to them, will depend on how you cash it out. But usually you will need to do this in reverse so to get this back to zero, and it does need to be cashed out. I'm just going to remove it for the sake of our demo, but you get the idea. We talked about print docs. This is where you pre-fill any of your preset laser forms. Again, do this so that everyone has these options available to them and they don't have to use this file print docs screen. Not to say you can't, but the print docs is a full compendium of all the forms you have available for you to print, and this could be much more difficult for a salesperson to navigate as opposed to you just setting up the buttons that they need to use. If you do want to set these buttons up, that does come from Edit, Modify, Buyer's Order Print List, and you basically say, okay, for button number 1, I want it to say this, buyer's order, and I want it to print out this document. And as you scroll through, you can see which documents you can print and in what position or order you print them in. So you can go 1 to 7, print out 7 different forms here if you'd like. This does not work well unless they are laser forms, because unfortunately with the Oki Data or the dot matrix printers, you probably wouldn't be able to load each separate form in time for it to print out, successively 7 different items. But for laser forms, this works great. Job costing is mostly for sublet work if you need to include any of that info here. I don't tend to find that utilized too heavily, so we'll move on. So we've already talked about 2 tabs, the quote and the buyer's order. They're pretty much the exact same types of information. We've talked about the accessories, and I've shown how to drop a work order, which would be prep work automatically for a service PDI manager to begin. The insurance tab is if you'd like to include the insurance information of your purchaser, so their agent name, what is their policy, any of this, if necessary. Again, usually gets skipped if not needed. The taxes tab, which we've talked about, preload as much as you can in your preset, but know that you have full control to both override taxes through the override tool here, as well as control over each item and whether it's taxed or not and by what rate. Again, these are items best completed in the presets so that you don't have to think about them from deal over deal. The personnel tab is going to be important to show for reporting and for the commissions tab. If your name is not on this personnel tab, you won't show up in the commissions tab. So again, make sure that you're here if you are getting a commission on this deal, and for reporting purposes that you're marked correctly. So we've got Tim here. He's going to be our salesperson. Looks like I have 2 F&I managers. We'll go ahead and remove that one. Maybe look at our preset and make sure that it's only adding these 2. But this looks good to me for commission purposes, so I'll move on. The S profit tab is a breakdown of all of the front end profit happening on the portions of the deal that we've just touched, which was the quote and the buyer's order. Nothing you can really manipulate here, but this is just a sales overview, breaking down your gross, what the total commissionable amount is, cost to the salesman, your percentages, and you even get history. So if this VIN was sold and traded into your dealership more than once, you'll see each time it was sold, each time it was returned in, and the margins you've made each successive sale. So kind of watch the depreciation of that asset as you continue to both collect it and sell it. From here, we have an F profit tab, and this is controlling both the back end products, so your warranty products, road guard, tire and wheel. You can control their costs, so we know where that payable amount is showing up for that vendor. And you can also control your finance reserve and your buy rate against your sell rate. Typically, we've had just about every calculation you need in here. You can always do a flat rate override, but typically we will have the bank's rate you need to make sure that your calculation here is correct. You'll get some breakdowns on product profit as well as overall financed amounts. And then, of course, you can apply chargebacks to your sales team or any WEO information that will go to accounting. The commissions tab, like we talked about, when I'm ready to load everybody's presets, I can hit load defaults, and everyone's percentages or flat rates will automatically apply. So Krieger gets a 10% on the front end, Tim gets a 5% on the front end, and Lavoris gets a 10% on the front end and the back end. And here's all those commissions, whether they've been paid, what date they were paid, and if it was after a a salesperson split. You can preload these defaults by going to the Edit Defaults table and assigning each of your sales team members default percentages. Unfortunately, we can't do any tiered commission calculations here, so if someone gets a higher percentage on a higher dollar item, we can unfortunately only plug in just a flat percentage here, so you may need to calculate those commissions separately and then plug them into this screen by simply overriding with the flat rate field. We have a history tab that tracks every change within the deal. The field you changed, what the old value was, what the new value was, who changed it, and when. Both the Motility team as well as yourselves don't have any access to edit this information. So you can take this as pretty much the true finding as to what, how this deal calculated, if there was an error, something went wrong, whether it's a syntax error on the front end or maybe a software error. We can capture all of that information in here, and our team will know how to better assist based on what they can find. So we don't expect you to know how to navigate or use this history, but as you use the system more and more, you'll be able to find out why deal pricing is changing. When no one says they changed it, well, unfortunately, someone did, and we'll be able to find that within this table. So there's always accountability as to what's going on within the system. There's a task system like we've talked about, like in the CRM. So as things happen in the system, let's say when a deposit is taken, you set a 24-hour task for the sales manager to reach out and thank the customer for their business. We could set that up, and your team could use this task tab to make sure that all the tasks relevant to this deal or this customer have been completed. The leasing tab, again, is only relevant if you do any leasing. And of course, the deal does have to be marked as lease for this tab to become available. There is a comparisons tool. So if you like to do a side-by-side, maybe comparing different lenders or cash versus a financed deal, you can do so here. And once that information is applied and that customer wants to agree to that, you can hit the apply button up here at the top, and it will go ahead and stamp this information back in over on this quote tab. So nice to do a little side by kind of a four square with a customer. Buyer information we've already talked about. If there is a co-buyer we need to add, you simply click add buyer down here at the bottom, and this will add their co-buyer, or it would have attached their co-buyer had there been one on the entity. Let's say their co-buyer does not exist. You can always create an entity record on the fly by simply just punching that customer's information in and then populating that tab. You can also switch between the co-buyer and buyer. Once you have that buyer record, there's an option to say change to buyer, and that will flip these two for the purposes of running credit. And as you notice, you can pull credit directly from this screen if you are interfaced with our 700 credit integration. We talked about the units tab already. Again, add as many units as you want. You can even order a unit from here and create a unit record if you are doing custom vehicle purchases and ordering for a prospect of yours. We can go into that in more detail in a different session, but good to know that you can actually order to spec a unit and then create that on the fly. To remove a unit, simply delete these out, or you can change the stock number here to the stock number you are actually selling, and that will update the deal. So you can quickly swap a unit in and out as a customer decides differently. The trades tab we've talked about, if there is trade information. You can also force this trade to inventory ahead of time. Maybe we know this deal is going to happen, but we don't want to wait until the date of delivery to post this to accounting and then, of course, create this. So you can hit update to inventory, and the system will create this trade record as a pending trade in the expectation that we will finalize the deals and then, of course, post the unit value to accounting. The disclosure tab is just simply a review of everything we've kind of been discussing. This is something that you can't edit anything, but it's a nice, here's everything to make sure we've got all of our dates right, all of our pricing information correct. That way there's no question before we actually print these contracts. There is an accounting tab that is no longer used. All the accounting transactions will be found in View Accounting. And then we also have a service tab, which we talked about briefly earlier. This is just simply looking at all of the service work for either the unit on the deal or the trade that's getting traded in. So we can review this, maybe figure out why some of the service work hasn't been completed, so that I know that, hey, this $200 and this $366, all of these accessories that we've added, our depth finder, our PDI, and our brake controller, we need to make sure these get done before we post this deal to accounting. So a lot of visibility. Let's say I am ready to post this deal. We are going to have a full training webinar on posting deals, but it's simply marking the deal as done. So we have 3 done statuses. This one is saying unit delivered. It is warning me that there's an RO open, but now I can proceed and mark the unit as sold. I'll get a commission sheet pop up here. And then now our accounting team would come back into the deal, validate that the deal matches the contracts, and they'll go ahead and post it to accounting. So now I've changed it to unit delivered. Now that it's done, down here on the bottom, there's a post to accounting button that will allow me to submit this to accounting. So that is a deal start to finish. Obviously, I ran through it fairly quickly to kind of make sure we fit within our hour time constraint here. And we could go into more detail on some of these other processes, customizing your setup, but you've seen a deal pretty much start to finish. Now, how long does that deal take between this status down to here? Well, that differs from every vehicle type, every dealership. So again, it is very important that these statuses truly reflect what's happening from start to finish. Otherwise, you'll find the system clunky and not following your deal as it naturally flows through from a quote into a customer taking delivery. So really, I think getting these statuses as cleaned up and replicating what you do day to day is going to make this process much easier. So that's all I have for you on kind of just general navigation of deal desking, creating quotes and deals and working through them. I'll leave the next few minutes here. I know we're bumping right against our 2 p.m. Eastern cutoff, but this has been educational for 10. We have another session here coming up at 3 p.m. That's the invention. I'll do with what CRM as well as deal. We will how to key in new process will look like, and hopefully ways to make keying in inventory a little bit easier. So I'll go ahead and open the floor. I haven't seen any questions come through in the Q&A yet. So hopefully this has been pretty straightforward to you. And again, thank you all for attending. So if I don't see you all this afternoon, thank you all for both this morning and this afternoon. And again, I'll leave this for a few more minutes to see if any questions trickle in. Otherwise, we'll catch you this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Excellent. So Greta has a question here regarding what happens if there's an open RO and you've closed the unit or the deal. So the deal I have open is actually a perfect example of this. The unit has been marked delivered, and let's say either we have posted it to accounting or we haven't. If we haven't and our accounting team sees that there's still service work open, they see that from the yellow tab and the fact that these 3 line items are open. You can also see that that cost is still yellow, knowing that that's an estimate. If I were in the accounting department and I went to go post this, I would hold off and say, you know, hey, can we get that service ticket closed before I post this? Now, realistically, that's not always an option. Sometimes service has delays, there's parts waiting to be ordered and received, so maybe we can't. If we want to go ahead and get the revenue and the costs and everything related to this deal into the appropriate month, we could go ahead and post the deal to accounting as it is. Now, what is it going to do? Well, the system only knows the vehicle cost at the time of posting. So right now, my vehicle cost is $1,688.12. If that service ticket stays at its exact pricing and it posts to accounting with the same vehicle cost that we're showing here, you don't have to do anything. Everything will follow suit because this estimate was right and we posted the deal to accounting. If you notice, at the time of posting to accounting, the deal removes exactly that cost. So if our service tickets close out exactly as they are now, everything's perfect. You don't have to do anything else. If, however, the service work changes, more labor or parts get applied, and this cost is now different, well, now our deal is understating the true value of what the vehicle was at the time of sale, and we need to revisit it. So what would happen then is the service work cashes out a couple days later. You're going to come back into the deal, and you just hit post to accounting a second time. The deal is smart enough to unpost and repost itself, but to zero out the original posting. So if this had gone up by $400 and we're now showing a $2,000 vehicle cost, when we post this to accounting a second time, you will see the differences there. And what's the best way for you to know all of the deals that have been posted and there's still outstanding service work assigned that either hasn't been cashed out or isn't out there as an estimate? There's an audit report in the Motility in accounting reports here, and that is called Sold Units with Inventory Balances. This one report, you don't have to plug in any dates here. A sold unit should never have an inventory balance, right? If it's gone, it should be gone off the inventory. And it won't be if that service ticket's still open or still cashed out and posted against the unit that's gone. So this one audit report, if you ran this daily, you should be able to find all of the units that have service work outstanding that needs to have their deal reposted. So I've got a lot of work to do in my test environment here. I've got about close to $1 million of unposted inventory, posted inventory that really should have come out on the deal side. So try using that report, and that will help you keep on top of the work that hasn't been posted yet. Or you could take the first option that I mentioned and don't post your deal until the service work does get closed. But obviously every dealer, sometimes that's not an option because of the delays in service. So it may be a case-by-case basis, but usually if you do need to repost, it's just simply going right back into the deal and hitting post to accounting again. Because like we mentioned before, I can hit this button as many times as I want. Now, it is a couple more entries for the accounting team to have to see, but just know that the deal is always going to appropriately post an odd amount of entries. A positive that was our first entry, a negative that was our reversing entry for the original, and our new positive entry that will have whatever changes took place to the costs. Sorry that answer was a little long-winded, Greta, but I hope that answers your question. and I will catch you later today. All right, I haven't seen any other questions come in. So again, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Greta, for a good question that does come up quite a bit and something you do want to be familiar with. And yeah, it should be as simple as just reposting those deals once you find that the service work has closed. But again, thank you all. For those of you that will be joining us at our 3 o'clock inventory session, we'll talk to you then. Otherwise, have a great rest of your afternoon.